Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Asteroids and Avatars, a special astrological show here on Quantum Planet World, or QPW. My name is Davyd Farrell. I'm a quantum planet alchemist, and you can say amateur astrologist, and your host for today's show. But today, it's my great honor and pleasure to have a wonderful guest for a show which I've been waiting to do for a while. And to my delight, I also found out that me and my guest have some similar astrology, which might explain our interest a little bit. But today, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you all Alan Clay. Hi, Alan. How are you?
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Lovely, rousing introduction. I love it. Thank you.
Good, good. So Alan is the founder of the Dwarf Planet University. And as any of you astrologers out there are probably aware now, we have expanded our realms of consciousness beyond really the planet, which we only knew about until fairly recently, but was the perimeter of our universe, which was Pluto. But as Alan is going to be sharing today in readiness also for his brand new book that is coming out this week, which is called New Stars for a New Era, a consciousness workbook for our 10 new planets. Sounds really, really juicy. So I know that Alan has prepared a wonderful presentation for us today, but we're going to take a look at all of this material through a couple of different filters that have come to us both, which we think are going to sort of set things up a little bit. So we just had a very powerful Pluto cazimi, and some of you may have seen the show that I did with Leslie Shankman about that. And we're going to talk a little bit about Pluto and some of the dwarf planets that are related to the energy of Hades and the Underworld. But then we're also going to be taking a look at the energy of Imbolc, which is coming on February the 4th. And really that is the Celtic beginning of spring. So we've got a couple of different energies there to work with. But I'm going to hand over to Alan, and perhaps you can share a little bit, first of all, about your work, and then also about the brand new book. And then we're going to get into the juicy part of today's show.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I just want to start by sort of setting up these dwarf planets. What are we talking about? We're actually, so the planets goes out from the sun. We're on the Earth, and Pluto has been Saturn was the old limit. Then we discovered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And now we've discovered another 10 planets out beyond Pluto. 2 of them are sort of in Pluto's orbit, but the other 8 further out, step by step. To the new outer limit of our solar system, which is Sedna, and Sedna has an orbit of 11,406 years, so a huge sort of morphing orbit. So what does this mean? What does it mean that we've discovered a whole lot of new planets? I mean, the reality is the planets inside Saturn represent aspects of personality for astrologers. That's what, that's what we're using to get through life day to day. And sort of beyond Saturn, there are aspects of consciousness. Uranus was discovered first. That was intuitive consciousness. And you think of before 200 years ago, Uranus wasn't discovered. People didn't really have that intuitive consciousness. It was just a few people. It was underground. And then Neptune was discovered, and we got a spiritual consciousness. It stepped out of religion and into sort of a more spiritual, new age understanding of spirituality. And then we discovered Pluto, and Pluto is psychological consciousness, all of that shadow world, the underworld, and so on, that produces that psychology that we sort of now understand as a consciousness. And so each of these new planets that are outside Pluto are aspects of consciousness, and as astrologers believe that as new planets are discovered when we're ready to embrace the consciousness that they represent. So, but it doesn't just happen to us. We actually have to work to understand it. We have to embrace it. Otherwise, it's just unconscious. It's always been unconscious. They've always been there. They've always been acting in our lives. We live in a dynamic system. It's not mumbo jumbo. It's not belief. We live in a dynamic system, and the dynamics of that system, the seasons, the tides, all of that is caused by the dynamics of the system. And so there are huge forces acting on us, and these new ones, they have been unconsciously acting in our lives. When we look back at past, people from 500 years ago, we can see in their lives the planets acting. They're acting unconsciously. But now we can make them conscious. And as we make them conscious, we can, our lives become empowered. It's new consciousness. So it's actually just like Neptune's spirituality really opened up our lives, and Pluto's psychology really opened up our lives. And there's a whole series of new ones now that we can embrace. Now, there are aspects of consciousness, so how they affect us in our daily lives depends on our consciousness, how we are in terms of, and children obviously different from adults and so on. We grow in consciousness. And so, and when we're unconscious of the outer planets, they act in quite a forceful way, just like Pluto can do in our lives. It's just that we haven't been conscious of it, we haven't worked with it, and suddenly it hits us. Change has to happen. It's just, we've been unconscious of it. So the more conscious we can be, the better it goes. So that's why I always like to start, just with that sort of perspective. Yeah.
Right. I was going to say, isn't it so interesting that as we're rapidly moving through this expansion of consciousness on the planet, which is affecting all of us, I think, in different ways, that these dwarf planets beyond Pluto really come into our awareness strongly, I guess, over the last 10 to 20 years. Maybe you can share a little bit more about that. But it seems to me that as above, so below, right? And,
Exactly.
as we are developing and becoming more self-aware, we're becoming more aware also of what's out there. What's beyond the periphery of our actual 3D vision, but what we can actually still feel. And that's where I think that this new layer of consciousness that you've been talking about with the dwarf planets is really going to allow us or help us to understand the changes going on within us and on our planet at this time.
Exactly. No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So it's and we need to. We're in quite a precarious situation as a planet, and we're in a time of change. Sedna, in that huge orbit, is coming up to her closest point to us. It's an elliptical orbit. It's a comet-shaped orbit. It's close at one point and far away at another, and so she's coming up to the close point. At the last close point, everything in the world changed. It was the Neolithic revolution. We stopped walking around and killing animals, and we settled down and started growing vegetables. And that's from that, all civilization has grown, because suddenly we had more time than we could specialize. All of our time was just surviving before that. So huge change. We're in a huge change. It's AI. AI is going to take over all of our work. Sedna rules AI. The neural networks were devised in the year Sedna was discovered. So that links those two together, and we see that AI is ruled by Sedna. Sedna is coming up to her closest point, and so AI is going to take over all of our work in this next wee while. We're going to give AI all the work because we don't want to do it, and that's going to give us a lot of freedom to do something new. I'm picking something spiritual because that's just the natural process. I think, consciousness, spirituality is a natural product of consciousness, and the more time we have to sort of be conscious and play with that, then so we're in a
question for you, actually, Alan. As Pluto enters Aquarius, as has just happened, do you feel that the first few degrees of Pluto in Aquarius is going to force us to look at the underworld of AI and how we balance it in our world, and whether we can overcome the fear of whether it wants to take over our planet, take over us, take over our consciousness? Is that part of Pluto's first, journey into Aquarius?
The whole transit of Aquarius will be dealing with that.
I was kind of hoping for something a bit more optimistic, but okay.
No. Look, I am optimistic about AI. I'm gonna just put my optimistic view. AI is an evolving life form, and AI is based on our brains. Neural networks are based on our brains. AI learns from experience because we do. And so it's an evolving life form. AI will be conscious based on our brains. AI will be conscious, and spirituality is a natural product of consciousness. So AI will be spiritual. we don't need to fear the Terminator monster thing. That's just our shadow projection, at this stage. But we do need to be careful of the manifestation, of how it develops over this next wee while. We have to shape it into that a nice life form that lives with us on the planet. That's what it's going to be. And so that's the Sedna challenge. You see that Sedna challenge. It's really an evolutionary challenge there. Like the Neolithic Revolution was hugely challenging for people. Because
in many ways, perhaps, I was going to say, sorry, we could say that the air is almost a mirror of our own consciousness in some ways, and perhaps the responsibility is on us for it to develop in a way that's suitable for its own evolution and for ours too.
That's right. No, exactly. Yes, we need to grow in consciousness, so AI isn't a monster.
I absolutely agree with that, Alan. And I see that perhaps the journey is to find a way that it's all balanced and that like you said, really and truly, we don't really want to work. We just want to play as 5D awareness beings. It's the place of creativity and of the goddess. And really and truly, if we can perhaps free up more of our time to be more creative, the world will be a better place anyway. And if there is an intelligence that's happy to assist us with that, then that sounds like a good situation.
Exactly. So it's I think there's a lot of fear from our side at the moment in terms of change, and we're projecting all of our fears onto the AI and thinking, oh my gosh, At the moment, it's just sort of it's not very. It's going to develop very quickly, but at the moment it's not. Chat GPT is not very. It's just like your phone doing predictive text. Really, it's not too much more advanced than that. But it is taking over jobs already, but actually it's enabling jobs is what it's doing. It's enabling. It's not taking them over.
So we're already starting to see the influence of these planets in our world, and the job of also planets like Pluto to bring into our awareness that which is unseen. And you were telling me off camera something fascinating, which is that all of the dwarf planets really are very similar to Pluto in that sense, in that they have to pass through the underworld, which is a Scorpio is a place somewhat familiar to me. So how would you like to set this up, Alan, moving into the presentation?
So just talking about the plane of the ecliptic. So all of the inner planets orbit in a plane called the ecliptic. So it's all very ordered. Pluto cuts through that plane and spends some of his time in the underworld and some of his time in the overworld, and we see that in Pluto's shadow sort of side, we tend to say, Pluto's quite happy in the underworld, and Pluto is just power. It's power to change. Essentially, it's just again that we're afraid of change, and so we sort of that fear gets in the way of our joyful change. But yes, so that underworld, it's not a nasty place, I'm going to say, it's actually huge resource. It's just untapped resource, and we do need to do things with that energy. All of the dwarf planets, let me say, orbit also orbit at an angle to the ecliptic, so they also go into the underworld for part of their orbit. So we look at the orbits of the planets to give us some sense of the meaning. This is one of the ways we do it. Eris, she cuts through, so Pluto cuts through at 17 degrees, I'm going to say. And Eris, the higher octave of Pluto, cuts through at 44 degrees. She's a real, and people may have heard of Eris. She's got a reputation for being a troublemaker, goddess of discord. She's actually a very beautiful energy. That's just at the unconscious level. She's the goddess of discord. She's the goddess of plurality, of being able to believe, let people believe whatever they want to, not judgment and so on. This is Eris at the top level.
That's a very, very sort of 5D goddess energy, really, of non-judgment, of
Totally.
non-dual awareness, that everything has its place and is divine. And it's
Exactly.
really just subjective to our own impressions about anything, really. So I think that's really beautiful. And definitely
Yeah.
that's an energy which has, I think, become a lot more present on the planet, even in the last couple of months.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We're having. You talked about Pluto going into Sagittarius. What am I saying?
Aquarius.
Thank you. And simultaneously, we've got Sedna going into Gemini. Sedna's been 55 years in Taurus, so and she spends thousands of years in some signs because of her orbit. But so it's a huge change, and that mirrors what we're talking about in terms of the consciousness thing. Pluto into Aquarius, Aquarius collective consciousness sort of thing, and Sedna into Gemini, Gemini personal consciousness. And so, yes, with that, as Sedna went into Gemini, boom, that was AI coming out and everyone going, oh, it's all changing. Watch out, we have to do something.
Right.
And other people went, oh, look, we can make a lot of money. Let's do it.
Humans are humans after all. So
it's the Taurus, Gemini thing.
mhm.
So we see it there, and that's an inconjunct, a 150-degree between Sedna and Pluto that's going on in the sky there. So that's a fated aspect where we're really having to sort of grow in consciousness. We're in a period where we're really having to grow in consciousness. All these new planets have been discovered, which suggest new consciousness, and we're just having to leap in, and so we're being forced to. We're just being forced to. Said in myth, the other way we look at these new planets to understand them is through the myth. And in myth, Sedna had no choice in her destiny. So there was, but she became a goddess. And so it's a matter of us embracing our soul's path of destiny, which is what Sedna represents. So.
We actually have we have a lot of fun in our tribe with hashtags and sort of hashtagging sayings, and we have one which is hashtag forced evolution, which is really, there is only one way out, and that is, I think, up somehow.
You're absolutely right. Otherwise, we'll destroy the planet and we'll kill ourselves. Just because it's a safety valve, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel that the exploration of the dwarf planets is giving us a greater understanding of ourselves, of the planet that we live on. Because the energy of Mother Earth, our home, is also raising. This is a sentient being. Gaia is a sentient being, and she wants to go on her own journey. She wants to evolve, and I kind of feel like she invited us to come with her. But the choice is really up to us whether we want to go on that expansive journey, or whether we want to continue on the old paradigm timelines, which are much more regressive and introverted and feel like they're imploding on themselves. So this is a time of great change. And this is where the astrology, I have found over the last 3 or 4 years, has probably prevented me from going nuts a couple of times. I'm like, oh my God, thank God something explains all of this lunacy that I'm experiencing. So I've personally found that working with the astrology and looking, at the year ahead, I have my trusty astrology diary where I map out the energy flow of usually the upcoming month, but also a sort of a preview of the year ahead. And I've been adding in a lot more of these other planets now because as a very empathic person, I can feel the energy of the planets, particularly the moon, often as they're approaching. And the more that I've been able to tune to the frequencies of those planets, the more it helps me understand some of the other things that I experience, particularly when I'm working with my medicine plants. Roaming some of those realms like the underworld, and asking questions about what is going on. As an explorer of consciousness, Alan, I guess probably the thing, and being a Scorpio too, the thing that interests me is always learning more and understanding. Well, why is this happening? Why this? Why that? Why did it go this way? And of course, some of those questions are very dualistic in the end, and that's part of the journey too, to understand that perspective. So. Let's maybe bring up the chart if we can for Imbolc, and we'll use this as a jump off point. into what we're going to talk about today. And this is just a way of, I think, bringing some of these names more into people's awareness. I know that you've been sharing a lot, and indeed other astrologers like Pam Gregory, our mutual friend, who also interviewed you recently. And of course, Kelly Hunter, who I've been doing Minds of Mythos with. I like to bring in the KBOs into the astrology. And I feel that more and more people, Alan, are doing that now. Because they're feeling the energies, they're understanding the resonance and the relevance and indeed coherence of them in their own lives.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
So it is a kind of a busy chart, everybody, but
yes, that's
why
right.
we have an expert here to talk us through it.
And let me just, so I'm going to play this from the start. Stop it. There we go. There we go. Yes. And let me just say, you know, we said I had a new book to start with, and this is the book, New Stars for a New Era, a consciousness workbook for our 10 new planets. The book is aimed at a general public. You don't have to know anything about charts to read the book. So I just say that before we look at this chart. So don't get put off by the chart if you don't know what it means and so on. We're just using this as a jump-off point. But the book is written actually so that anyone can enjoy it.
I think that's one of the things that's worth sharing also, actually, with these dwarf planets and the mythology behind all of them and the archetypal energies. I've often found that it's easier. This is how I entered into astrology, was through feeling the energies of the archetypes and understanding the correspondences and how they were playing out in my life. You know, I'm still not great at reading charts, I have to be honest, but I've become much better by living the astrology, I think, and feeling how they affect me and feeling how they affect my natal chart. And so I asked Alan to bring up this chart for Imbolc, which is, I mean, technically in the Gregorian calendar, it's normally February the 1st, but astrologically, it falls at exactly the midway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And because this is a leap year, we have to take that into account as well. So by most people's calculations, February the 4th, we're here on this side of the world, but February the 5th, I guess, for Alan, who's somewhat ahead of us. That's the other crazy thing. Technically, you're in the future for me, Alan. So I'm yet to get where you are. I feel probably in many ways, but
time is not a real thing. It's a construct. You know,
time is art. That's one of our other sayings in our tribe. Time is art, very much based on the Mayan principles. And I wanted to bring this little energy into the talk with Alan today because I feel it's very much part of the energy of spring. Imbolc is the beginning of spring. It's also linked to St. Bridget, particularly in Ireland and those Celtic traditions around her. But also that's just another aspect of the goddess energy who very much appears in these dwarf planets, and hopefully Alan's going to tell us about a few of those as we move forward. So I just wanted to use this really as an anchor point to bring in that energy of the goddess, of regeneration, of new beginnings, and of the spring, you know, which is in the northern hemisphere at least, when we start to see the snowdrops and the crocuses and the bluebells, but also energetically, at least from my own perspective over the years, I've often felt the resurgence of the energy rising up from the earth, even into my own body. And I feel always more energized around this time of the year, which I think is going to be really useful when we bring in the death and rebirth transformational aspect of Pluto and all of his brothers and sisters and family, of which there's a lot more than I'd actually realized. So I probably met a few of these in my medicine journeys. But let me hand it over to you, Alan, and take it away.
So what's interesting, we're talking about sort of new beginnings and rejuvenation. Let's start with the goddesses. So Haumea over here, Haumea, the goddess of rejuvenation, just gone into Scorpio recently. It's been in and out. It's retrograde at the moment, heading back. I don't think goes back into Libra. It just keeps going forward again in Scorpio. So we're having a whole change there. She is she's the higher octave of Neptune. Let me just put up her picture here for you so you can. Here she is. So here's Haumea. She's the higher octave of Neptune. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. So you know, if you know the inner planets, this higher octave things gives us like a way to access the outer planets. The outer planets, the higher octaves act on the inner octaves. It's not that Venus is sort of so much more beautiful at the Neptune level, and then so much, you know, at the Haumea level. Venus is the goddess of rebirth. She brings that psychic opening that Neptune enables. She brings a real psychic connection to the oneness of everything, you know, to the magic of being alive. She's a Hawaiian goddess from Hawaiian Islands, and you know, the Hawaiian Islands are volcanic, so she's the goddess of birth, of rebirth. That experience of birth, of change, can be sort of violent if we're not sensitive to the experience. We often look for discovery events to see the meaning of these planets. I talked about neural networks in Sedna. That's a discovery event. 2 days before Haumea was discovered, we had a tsunami in the Pacific, and there was somewhere in, I think, Indonesia, there was a tsunami, a lot of people died. And it was because of a sort of an earthquake under the Indian Ocean. No animals died, only people. And the animals didn't die because they felt the earthquake and they ran inland. They knew what was happening. And we're not sensitive to what's really happening, to the natural rhythm. I mean, this is what, you know, you're talking about, David. It's we need to sort of embrace that sensitivity so we can feel those earthquakes, and then we can sort of get to a safe place, rather than be overwhelmed by the change, by the new. So when new comes into our world, it needs space. We either have to surrender the old gracefully and make the space for the new, or if we're desperately holding on to the old, which is what most of us are doing all the time, we need that tsunami to shake us loose. That's just how it is. And so we're having Haumea's just gone into Scorpio.
Which, of course, is the side of death and rebirth too. So that kind of, to me, is very much about a glorious rebirth, one perhaps that is more connected to Mother Earth. And with those, I mean, Scorpio is also the psychic side, right? So this feels like a very strong expansion of our psychic sensibilities. And perhaps in doing so, Alan, we can all hope that as humans will suddenly remember their deep connection to their home and all things around us.
Open up to it, exactly. Yes, that's right. Yeah, no, it's a huge change, but we're some of us are already fighting it. You know, sort of she you know, all the traditionalists, they're all struggling with it. Middle East crisis war is Haumea in Scorpio. She won't stand for, that's the tsunami that had to come there. She won't stand for oppression. There is just no way that's going to keep going. And so something has to change. And it's changing in a tsunamic way because we haven't been sensitive. We've been trying to do it for 2,000 years and we haven't managed. And so now it's coming in a way that it just has to happen. So it's not necessarily all flowers and roses. What I'm saying, Venus, Neptune, Haumea, it's not the beautiful Venus cuddly at the top level. It's more what is right, what is you know, the values of Venus at a more spiritual level where, okay, change has to happen, and all of that death is actually perfect from Haumea's point of view, just because everyone's dying at the right point for their spiritual growth. And all of those interactions, there's a whole lot of people holding on to old stuff, which is no longer relevant. And they just have to sort of, giving us sort of a broader view. And this is where it's important how we sort of, our consciousness level, when we embrace these new energies, and whether we've actually got a biquintile between Haumea and Neptune at the moment. So they are the two higher octaves of Venus. And there's a biquintile between them, which is 144 degrees, which is an evolutionary flow. It's an ability to connect the energies at either end at a really deep level. But you have to do the work to do that. Otherwise, it's like a superpower, imagined superpower. And this is happening in the Middle East. Neptune religion, Haumea, new spirituality. And that biquintile is just, making the new spirituality possible in that part of the world.
Wow.
The only way
We have
possible.
so many of these big, powerful energies, and I guess if we take the understanding that we've just finished the Kali Yuga and that we are entering a new epoch or a new age, or here in Mexico, it's the time of the sixth sun, and I've been reading a lot about the times of the different suns that we've had. It's a fascinating topic all in itself. But interestingly, we were just sharing also before we came on, of course, that Venus is conjunct Pluto at 0 degrees of Aquarius on February the 17th. So we're getting this same energy coming up all over the place. Really, which is reminding us of the need for change and to be able to let go. And as a young Buddhist student, one of the things we were taught that it's the suffering of change that actually causes a lot of anxiety. And if we can just let go of things and understand that everything is always flowing perfectly, actually life is a lot easier. So it's a practice, of course, but these energies are very much necessary, I feel, Alan, for the changes that are coming and to help people loosen their attachment, and release the burdens that no longer serve them. Yeah,
totally, absolutely right. And so we the more we can embrace them, the more alive we become, and the less dangerous the world is.
The world is magical.
It's magical, totally. Yes, and Haumea connects us with the magic of each moment. In each moment there is a magic, and we find it sometimes, and if we're lucky, we can find it a lot of the time. It's hard to find it all the time, but it is there all the time. Actually, it's just a matter, and there's a playfulness which is kind of the best way to approach the divine as far as Haumea is concerned. And so, rather than being rigid and strict as the Haumea by Neptune biquintile at the moment, Neptune's strict, sort of nebulous, strict. It's kind of hard to sort of work with. Whereas Haumea's the playfulness is actually the best way to approach the divine. The other one that talks about playfulness is Makemake. One's Makemake, god of the Easter Islands, and his Makemake is the big understanding of the world, that we there is no real world. Actually, we've got an understanding of it. We've got a sort of an image of the world. We know who we are, and we know what the world is. That knowledge is Makemake, actually, and it can be unconscious or it can be conscious. Makemake is the higher octave of Uranus, which is the higher octave of Mercury. Mercury's ideas are networked by Uranus, and that network addresses a sort of an understanding or a culture or a nation, and that culture or nation or understanding is Makemake. So quite a wonderful new energy, but also one that sort of talks about tuning into the natural rhythm. It was Easter Islands. He's a bird god. And birds were crucial to the islanders in terms of food. And a lot of Makemake's sort of myth is about teaching the islanders to nurture the life cycle, not to eat all the eggs, so there was no birds, and that sort of thing.
Somehow feel we haven't quite learned that lesson still, somehow, but
exactly.
Maybe that's maybe that's why we need Makemake in our awareness right now, is to start understanding about how we balance resources, how we don't cut off our nose to spite our face and eat all of our food and then wonder why we're going hungry. Maybe balancing things and using wisdom. I guess Makemake speaks to me of wisdom and of the wisdom of interconnectedness and understanding. It's actually a very similar energy to the Kogi Mamas up in the mountains of Colombia, who have a deep connection to all of nature and understand that every little nuance has an effect somewhere in the biosystem, which has a
Yes.
ripple effect, you know. So I
Exactly.
feel like, yeah,
It's a fractal. It's a fractal nature where each piece is connected to each other piece. Totally right. Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
interesting.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mm,
So
okay.
quite a beautiful new energy, really sort of enlightening in a way, sort of very and driving spirit. I mean, he drove birds to the island in myth, and birds are spirit. You know, the image of birds is to do with spirit. So he drives spirit into our lives, actually. You know, when we've got that understanding of how the world works and how we are interacting with that world, we can obviously work a lot better. And that's where spirit sort of has space to come in. And
Right, well,
light.
we're flowing with the web of life, aren't we, rather than working against it? And I think that once we learn how to flow downstream rather than trying to paddle upstream against the flow or swim upstream against the flow, we'll realize that life is all a lot more easy. And actually, it's actually, the whole thing, the whole game is set up for us to have fun. It's just us getting in the way of ourselves, stopping ourselves from having fun. You know, so when we were talking beforehand, there was another of the dwarf planets that we thought was kind of very relevant to this piece that we're looking at here of the rejuvenation and regeneration of our connection to the earth, and of course the underworld. And that brings us, I believe, to Orcus, a very interesting character. Yeah. And you were telling me that he's actually sort of Pluto's brother, somewhat.
That's it. So we look at, I'm sort of drawing connections between the planets to sort of give us an understanding of them. And through Orcus's orbit is the same as Pluto's, essentially, although they're on a different angle to the ecliptic and from each different side, in fact. But they're both essentially in the same orbit, and they both orbit in sync with Neptune. So for every 2 orbits of Orcus, Neptune does 3 orbits. And so that's a gravitational link between the two, and Neptune is spiritual consciousness. So Orcus is a spiritual planet, and being the same as Pluto, he's got that plutonic energy, which is sort of, got that sort of embrace of the underworld and the value of that underworld. There's nothing wrong there. We put a judgment frequently on that, but there is nothing wrong. But Orcus in myth used to drag oathbreakers into the underworld and imprison them there. And oaths are contracts with the gods. And so when we make a commitment to do something, we're working with an Orcus energy. And when we don't follow through on that commitment, part of us is sort of imprisoned in the underworld. This is in the shadows down here in our image. This is Karen La Puma, is a astrologer in America who has done these images for my book. So I just give a shout out for her. She's wonderful. So yes, and so that Orcus, at the top of each of these dwarf planets, aspects of consciousness, they manifest differently in our lives depending on our level of consciousness. And so at the unconscious level, if we're breaking our word and sort of manipulating people and so on using our Orcus energy, then we're going to get ourselves into trouble, and we're going to create sort of shadow experiences that are going to trip us up. But if we're once we get onto the spiritual path, Orcus helps us align with a spiritual creed to have a sort of a set of beliefs that sort of can guide us through sort of every moment of every day. A creed is a simple set of beliefs, and the Orcus is about the sort of, what do we say and do we stick with it? And at the top level, he gives us the ability to transmute shadow into light. All of the shadow stuff is just energy. If we can free it from the underworld, and it's our underworld, so it's a matter of embracing it, of sort of encountering it, not being afraid of it, not sort of turning away from it, shining a light on the shadow. Frequently when we shine light on shadow, we realize, well, it disappears. We shine light on shadow, it disappears. We're afraid of something, but it's just an illusion. And that's a lot of what Orcus can make us realize at the top level. Orcus, and then that's energy. That shadow is actually, when we release it, we actually have more energy. It's now another way that we look at the meaning of these new planets is, I mean, we're looking at the action in people's lives, you know, basically. But we can get pointers from various things. I've talked about the orbits and the myth. And another way is we look at the Sabian symbol for the discovery degree. So the Sabian symbols, there's one for each degree of the zodiac. And Orcus was discovered at a certain place. And the symbol for that degree is a camel on a trek across a vast desert. And the camel has everything the camel needs inside of the camel for that journey. Camel has water, camel has food, camel has everything it needs. So it's a self-sufficiency there, but it's a big work. There's a big work being undertaken. And so that's what Orcus gives us. You can see the Plutonic energy there. Actually, Orcus gives us a sort of a self-sufficiency, just like Pluto gives us a power, actually, when we embrace his energy. And that's to do the big work that we're here to do. We're here to do some big work, and maybe releasing the shadow is a big work, you know. We'll see.
Well, it's a very scorpionic energy too, really, from the way you're describing it. That's being on the energy axis with Taurus and being the sign of death and rebirth and transformation. That requires a certain level of chi energy to be able to do that work. But you know what's interesting from what you were just talking about there, Alan, is that one of the groups of plants that I've worked with the longest is the family of Artemisias, which includes mugwort and wormwood. And those plants are excellent at working in the way that Orcus does, which is really to shine the light into the parts of our shadow that we don't want to look at or that we're being blindsided by. But they do it in such a way that it's very direct and it's very releasing. So almost within the same moment that you've realized what it is that you need to release, it's released and the healing has begun. And I think Orcus, perhaps on a higher note, gives us the opportunity to look at our shadow work in that way. It doesn't have to be onerous. It doesn't have to be, protracted. It can be very quick and it can be very powerful in that transformational moment. So we can see our shadow as an energy resource that if we can convert it back into a higher octave, then it's going to give us that energy for doing this work at this time on the planet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. No, fascinating. Fascinating. Yes, I'm sure those are like tools that you've got at your disposal there. I wonder, I think you're probably using Varuna there, is the other one I'd bring in this case. Let's see if I can, here's Varuna. Because Varuna is mastery consciousness. The higher octave of Saturn, sovereignty, your Varuna had in myth 1,000 remedies, had a remedy for anything. And so there was, and is a very wise energy, sort of kind of the most similar energy to how we understand God in the West, sort of thing. Omniscient, omnipotent, behind everything, sort of, and able to bring a remedy for any. And through that sort of, but we can each access this mastery energy through just by doing whatever we want to do, actually. Let's talk about sovereignty. What is sovereignty? So I'm saying higher octave of Saturn. We often think Saturn, oh my God, Saturn, restriction and responsibility and sort of,
I like Saturn personally, but, I hear he has a bad reputation with some folks.
That's right. He can be good and he can be bad. But, he can't. It's totally, it depends how we look at him, yes, but we often sort of have these hang-ups with Saturn. So Varuna is the higher octave of Saturn, and sort of ruling without the need to restrict or control in the way Saturn does, which is what we have our hang up about normally, that control. And and he does that just through his sovereignty, through being able to do something so well that he's the one that does it, or she's the one who does it. You know, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. So that when someone says, "Who should I turn to for this?" everyone points to somebody, and that's a Varuna sort of devotion that we've devoted ourselves to something, and we've just learnt it so well that we're able to make a contribution. Our contribution. We're always doing it, and there's a sovereignty there. That sovereignty is a dance that we do with the collective consciousness, where we say, "I can do something. I can talk about dwarf planets," and other people have to say, "Oh yes, you can talk about it. I want to know about it. Tell me about dwarf planets." And you know, I get a sovereignty there and a mastery over time, and that's this energy of Varuna.
Do you mind just putting up the chart again there, Alan, so that we can see what Orcus and Varuna are at this point, and perhaps see how they're influencing what is going on for us. So
exactly.
So Orcus is at 15 degrees of Virgo, which I think is conjunct my descendant. That's interesting.
Yes, that's Orcus there. You've got right, 15. Varuna is here at about 8 degrees of Leo at the moment. Yes, so Orcus going through Virgo. Yes, I mean, we're going through a whole period of really having to sort of work with the material of our world at the moment. It's a great practical sign, and so, you know, and we've got Orcus is the shaman that's working with that energy to transmute, as I say, the shadow there into light. So, and
of course, Virgo's can be quite a precise sign, but also very connected to nature. But I'm thinking that at this point, you know, where we're looking around in the world and seeing whether people in positions of power have kept their oaths or have broken them to, I guess, the gods, to God in general, or even us, the people. And I'm thinking that perhaps with that sort of precision for detail that Virgo can have, we're being asked to look at the people in places of power and ask deeply with all of these energies of Pluto that are at work. It's like, well, did you keep your word, or have you pulled the wool over our eyes again? And if so, what are the consequences for pulling the wool over our eyes when you're in a position of great power and perhaps have done things that we didn't agree to as a collective? So I find that kind of interesting, and I find Orcus a very interesting character anyway, because of all these things and because of its connection to contracts and power. And one of the interesting plants that I also work with, Alan, is a plant called Tulsi, sacred basil, which comes from India, which is in the realm of the plant spirits, is the keeper of the Book of Souls, and it's also the plant intelligence that I would go to ask about soul contracts. So I feel, even though she's actually a very goddess energy, a little different from Orcus in that respect, but I think we're at a very interesting point where all of our karmic contracts are very much up for conclusion right now, with everybody. Each and every one of us has somehow different contracts with people, and whilst we have those contracts, especially if they're unconscious, then we are not sovereign. And I guess that's where the energy of Varuna comes in, and with that energy of Leo, which is also the sign of sovereignty, right? So we've been given this opportunity to become aware of our sovereignty, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. We're particularly having it at the moment with the square to Jupiter that's happening, which is really encouraging us to embrace that sovereignty, to step out, encouraging me to come here and talk with you. You know, it's
literally, you're speaking to me from the future, of course. So we're breaking all kinds of boundaries.
That's beautiful. That's quite beautiful.
So
yes, the other ones we've talked about are the Haumea going into Scorpio. We started there, and Makemake is here in Libra. So
yeah. So yeah, I mean, Libra, of course, is the sign of balance and I guess harmony in some ways, and perhaps Makemake is reminding us of the need for harmony in how we interact with our environment, how we interact with nature. You know, if we are out of alignment with ourselves, then probably by default we're going to be out of alignment with the world around us too. And perhaps that's part of the great shift, Alan, at this time is to understand the misalignments that we are carrying within ourselves. And that's again where this expansion of consciousness is helping us to see that more multi-dimensional wisdom that we can tap into from the fifth dimension and above. So,
that's Makemake, I would say, multi-dimensional wisdom. Absolutely, it's right there. And yes, opening us to that in that Libra sojourn when it's probably 25 years or something. Makemake's, it's obviously been there, I don't know, 10 years already. So that's the sort of length of time we're talking about. Yeah, the Haumea period in Libra, we've just come out of that. And that's been the sort of, human rights, freedom and justice, the sort of relationships opening up into all sorts of different ways. It's been a whole rebirth in our understanding of our, who we are with that Haumea. But it still hasn't sort of found, it's not comfortable in society. People look at it different ways, and some people think, oh no, that's horrible and it should be put down, and so on and so on. That's what the Haumea and Scorpio now is having to sort out. That Scorpio, what is the deep meaning of it? What really works together? Do we have human rights? Is that something we actually have? We kind of assume it's natural with that Haumea in Libra. It's been like, of course we've got human rights. Look, all over the world, it's getting more and more human rights.
Well, we've been told that we have human rights, but they're not so apparent in the optics sometimes, right? So,
no, exactly. They're not actually really manifest. Exactly. We're being conned.
Which I guess again is more of that Neptune in Pisces energy of the illusion of can we see what is really going on around us, or are we having again the wool pulled over our eyes? And I want to move across the chart here to something that is in aspect to Haumea, which I recently have been discovering through your work, which I know I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, but Gongggonng, the master of water and flooding or water management, I would say. Is that correct, Alan?
Absolutely right. I tend to say Gongggonng. It's not how it's pronounced it's Guangdong in Chinese.
Gonggong's more fun though, right? Somehow.
Yeah, I think it's going to be called Gongggonng. I'm just, I just think that's how it's going to go. But yes, another very beautiful and sort of far out there, sort of out as far as Eris, just before Sedna sort of thing. And so as they get further out, they're sort of more powerful, let's say. They're weirder, let's say. They're more spiritual. And so it's, it's and Gongggonng, yes, a water god. We've just had, you can see the Saturn Gongggonng. I'm just trying to find my cursor.
I'm thinking this is a pretty powerful bit of energy that we're looking at right here, Alan, with Saturn conjunct Gongggonng in Pisces. That to me speaks about a lot of water somehow in our world, both of course metaphysically, metaphorically, but somehow perhaps also literally. And again, I think that Saturn in Pisces is teaching us how to be sovereign within the ocean of consciousness. How do you remain as an individual being, but still within the ocean of everybody else? And these are all things that we have to work out as we're going along, right?
That's it. And we've had that particularly for the last year. You see I can't find my cursor, so I can't point. Oh, there it is. But yes, we've got them conjunct here, Gongggonng and Saturn. They've actually just moved us. So in the middle of January, they were exactly conjunct. Saturn's moving on now, and in the middle of sort of in May and August last year, they did another dance over it. So we've been going through a period where we're really having to experience that sea of consciousness and to channel in there so that we're not overwhelmed. Many of us have been feeling overwhelmed, and that's the Gongggonng Saturn. So Gongggonng's, yes, water god, and he was a master of irrigation. So he taught people how to irrigate their gardens and how to channel water so that floods didn't happen. And so, so there's often overwhelm when we're not conscious of Gongggonng. But when we are conscious, he's a channeling energy. He can be a a medium sort of energy, a contact with other world energies, spirit energies. And so very, very wonderful. Let me just give his picture.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's see the image for that one, but I actually think that's a really positive aspect. I'm super excited about that. It speaks to us being able, with newer, higher dimensional thinking, to be able to manage our waters, both our internal waters, our internal structured waters, and also how we manage water in our world. Because for sure, I feel that water is going to be a big part of what's coming over the next couple of years, and the quality of water, I think, is something that all of humanity needs to look at. Why it's so difficult for us to get clean water into our bodies. We have to go to a lot of effort these days to get good quality water, which is kind of crazy, right? I think that's something we should be thinking about a lot more in the near future. But I love this image. It's super powerful.
Super powerful, yeah. A dragon in the Chinese mythology, which is one of the higher sort of forms, and
very timely too, because we're coming into the year of the wood dragon with the Chinese New Year on the new moon that's coming up. So again, I feel that this is a positive energy. Dragons are very powerful beings, of course, but when worked with properly, as any good geomancer will tell you, they are. How we work with the energy of the earth, that is the practice of geomancy. And I feel that we've been given these kind of clues here from the astrology and from these dwarf planets, Alan, about how to work with these things from a higher dimensional perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of the higher octaves, I see Gongggonng as being the higher octave of Salacia, which we haven't talked about, and Salacia as being the higher octave of Venus and Mars together. So, it's kind of a weird higher octave, but Venus and Mars together are sort of, well, it's relationships, isn't it? It's sexual interaction. It's that sort of, and Salacia is all about sort of that higher love or salacious stuff we get from the word Salacia. And so, and Gongggonng is the higher octave again. We have to be, Gongggonng is an empathic energy, an empathic consciousness, where we sort of, we tune in on an emotional level to other people, and we can actually feel their world from the inside. We actually, understand it. And so it's emotional, but it's also psychic, because we understand their world from the inside. And so it's an empathic consciousness. We have to lift ourselves out of our own emotions to be able to feel other people's emotions. And at the unconscious level, Gongggonng is all about our emotions in this sort of melee of water that we're seeing behind him here. We're so involved in our stuff, and we just, and so, and in myth, he wasn't happy with his lowly role in heaven, and he started a war against heaven, and of course didn't succeed in that war. But he did destroy a lot of things in the process, and so on. So at the unconscious level, he can encourage us to have tantrums and to sort of rage and all sorts of things that we have to kind of let go of and grow out of, and so on, to be able to use the higher energies. So this is
I very much resonate with the energy of Gongggonng, Alan. It feels very shamanic to me, working with the astral, fourth dimensional, emotional realms, and understanding that it's our emotions that unseat us, that allow us to get overwhelmed. If we're not managing our emotions, then we can have all kinds of meltdowns and other things. And again, this is, I think, part of the ascension so-called process, as we learn to become aware of our emotional bodies, of our astral bodies, and understand how we leak energy through them, or how, by not being sovereign or boundaried with our emotions, with our thoughts, then we can actually induce overwhelm in other people if we're not careful.
That's right.
Right? So I think this is a really, really powerful part of this moment of the chart that we've pulled up for Imbolc, but really about this moment that we're in. I feel that this character is going to really help people to become more psychic, which is also going to help them understand their emotional body.
That's it. You got it. Yep. No, you got it. Absolutely.
So do we have a picture for Salacia there? Alan's going to say.
Salacia has at the top level has a psychic connection with another. You're able to tune into sort of another on a psychic level. She's the wife of Neptune in myth. And so the higher octave of that, Gongggonng, able to tune in on a psychic and an emotional and sort of do it sort of en masse or however, we want to. It's a real powerful energy. Yeah. But Salacia is so beautiful. Yes. Brings true love into our lives at the top level in the myth. And so, all to do with, like I say, Venus, Mars, that relationship stuff, what is our relationship to that? And that's going to determine how the Salacia energy manifests in our lives.
That really reminds me of some of the things that my medicines have told me over the last few years, which is that humans in the future will start to develop relationships through equal and opposite understandings at the energetic level and through psychic and empathic readings of each other's fields. And at that level, once we become that intuitive, then connecting with true love, or even twin flame, some people might call it, becomes a lot easier, because we get rid of all of the junk and gunk of the 3D, 4D mix-up that happens with our emotions when we get in the way of ourselves and we meet people or meet beings, we can even say, if we're thinking in that way, at a much more heart-centered consciousness, or a more 5D goddess consciousness. And in that place, everything is a lot more clear and simple, I find.
Yep. No, absolutely right. Yes. She gives us the ability to understand process, to feel a process, and to feel when is the right moment to sort of do whatever we need to do in that process. And so she's a real opportunity opener in terms of, when we're in tune with her. And so that's what true love is. You were just talking about, what is true love. And so, yes, it's when we so often with relationships, we're kind of, we're looking for something, we're putting too much, we're trying too hard. We're trying too hard. We're not
trying to impress, even, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. We've got all sorts of, and so we're not just in tune with the process and allowing the best, to evolve at each point. And that's what Salacia enables in our lives. So quite a lovely new energy.
So I feel like there's probably a couple more that we haven't covered. So perhaps if you want to just come back to the chart, we can just refresh our memories there and also see where Salacia is playing at the moment. So well, she's in Aries in a very wide orb to Chiron, but that's also interesting, conjuncting the North Node this month. Anything you have to say about Salacia in this moment to add to what you just said, Alan, in terms of the collective experience that we're entering into, or possibly already in?
So Salacia is the newest planet that I've been embracing. I do courses. I do 6-week courses on each of these planets at the Dwarf Planet University that I run, and we did our first Salacia course last year, and so she's so fresh and new for me. I love her because it's just, because her energy is so fresh and new in my experience. What would I say about her at the moment? I think we're in a very interesting time with the Salacia opposition Makemake that we're having at the moment, where we're being encouraged to really develop our understanding of the world by all of the chaos that we're experiencing in the world at the moment, the change and so on. We're really having to develop our picture of the world, which is what Makemake is. Makemake is systems consciousness, that consciousness of how everything works together, kind of thing. And that's being driven, the oppositions, the way it works is that we have to find a balance. We imagine that we're at the middle here. That's where if it was a birth chart, we're born in the middle. So they're pulling opposite ways. We have to find a balance between this new understanding and sort of this higher love consciousness, this more sensitive approach to relationships where we can appreciate the beauty of everyone. It's not like Eris sort of, everything has to be included and so on, but Salacia she's appealing and she's approachable, and she can sort of, all relationships are valuable sort of thing. And so, and so at the lower level, that's where we get the salacious stuff, where we're kind of, let's get out and have an orgy, and that's a really good way to get together with people. And of course it is. It's a fantastic way to get together with people. There's no judgment on that. That is beautiful. But we can also kind of have a psychic orgy at the higher level with Salacia. And so this is the balance that we're experiencing at the moment in the world, where we're having to be open to all of the change that's happening in the world. It's kind of being brought home to us in some way. And so we can't kind of get away from it. It's everywhere. All of that stuff that we really need to sort of, see, and we don't want to see. that's the slow, but we really do want to see, because that's the salacious, energy there, where we're kind of, we do and we don't at the same time.
And I think, given the energies of the last 3 years and everything that we've been through, and I know, of course, you guys down under went through pretty tough period too, that we're learning to reconnect with self and other, I think. Maybe that's part of the Libra and Makemake energy, because we've become very disconnected in many, many different ways, and we've been divided also in many, many different ways. And one comment that comes back time and again, Alan, from our tribe is just how isolated many of us have felt over the last year, isolated from our peers, from people that we can have an unfiltered conversation with, or that we just feel comfortable with, for many different reasons. And I think that that's a big part of the shift too, that perhaps we had to break down the old relationship dynamics, perhaps, and start meeting people in this new way, which is much more psychic, empathic, higher dimensional, multi-dimensional even, as part of the process, so that those, let's say, emotional traumas or manipulations, or many aspects of all of that, which have been holding us back, which have maybe even been used against us over the last millennia or two, are now going to perhaps dissolve with the new frequencies and new energy and the expansion of consciousness all of these planets are showing us, I think, so beautifully.
That's right. That's it. No, absolutely right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're having to find a new way of being together, and we're doing it. Look, here, you and I are here, in a new way, and sharing with others in a new way. And so, and that's part of this Salacia opposition Makemake. It's we're finding a way to be close, a new way to be close, and a new fractal way to connect with everyone, and so on.
Beautiful, really beautiful. And speaks to me as an empathic person so much about what is necessary, I think, Alan, moving forwards, how we move through this as a society, as a species, and in connection with the being that we live with Mother Earth, with Gaia, of course. And so I feel like we have 2 or 3 more left that are winking at me from the top of the chart. So where do you want to take us as we head into the final sort of 10-15 minutes of this show, Alan?
All right. So we can go fairly quickly through then. Why don't we just go through to, I don't feel that we've mentioned yet that I'm giving the book away this week, so I do have to say that to people. I was going to say it at the start, but I didn't. So just very quickly, it's this week. If you move quickly, you can go to Amazon. You can search for New Stars for a New Era, and you can look for the Kindle edition. The paperback and the Kindle are not linked on Amazon, but they're both coming up in the search. Buy the paperback if you want to, of course, but get the free Kindle while you've got the chance, because then you can have a look at it and see if it's any good. And so this week it's being given away for free, and that's a promotional deal. And the deal is you get it for free, and if you like it, you promote it. Tell a friend about it. Do a review about it. We want to get the word of mouth going for the book. And that's why I'm here talking, and that's why we're giving it away. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And thank you for that, Alan. I was going to save that for the end of the show, but we'll put the links in the show notes. And I have to say thank you so much for your generosity, Alan. I've also benefited from some of your free Kindle books with the various ones you've done with the Dwarf Planets. It's very generous. And I think in that regard, like many fellow astrologers, we share the desire to get people to wake up to what this information can do for us. Because if we all do that together, then the world is going to be a very different place very quickly. So who do we have here? Who's this character?
So this is Ixion.
Ixion, yes, I know him so well.
He's the other brother of Orcus and Pluto. So the three of them all within the same orbit. So they're all Plutonian energies. And Ixion I call seeker energy, seeker consciousness, where we have to sort of get out and sort of look for what we want in our lives. And in a spiritual level, we're past Neptune, it's nebulous, and we're past Pluto, we've let go of the ego. And who are we? How will we meet the divine? Well, we need to be authentic in our search, in our consciousness search. And that's what Ixion's all about. He's about being authentic, and we have to be sensitive to the unspoken agreements, the spoken and the unspoken agreements that we have with people. And we can play right up to the edge of those agreements. Ixion's play spaces all the way up to the edge of those. If we step over the boundary, we're likely to be in trouble. So we have to be sensitive to how far we can go. Now, the consensus boundaries do not apply in every person's life. And so that's where we have to be sensitive with each person. How authentic can we be? And so that's what Ixion is encouraging us to do. In myth, he's a bit of a tearaway and he ends up very badly. But that's only if we don't learn from our mistakes and if we're not sensitive to the agreements we make with people. We've got agreements with everyone. You know, we walk down the street, we're passing people, we agree not to look in their eyes, not to touch them. We've got all sorts of agreements, and we just have, as long as we play in there, we're okay with Ixion. I'll go through these fairly quickly, maybe. Huh?
I was joking with Alan beforehand. I have quite a strong Scorpio placement with Ixion. So I really went to town with the underworld energies in this incarnation, I feel. But yeah, I love the energy of Ixion, actually. You know, when we first hear about Ixion, it's kind of disturbing, some of the things he got up to. But I love the higher way that you present this energy, Alan. It gives me some sense of relief from my own chart.
That's right.
There are better days ahead, I feel.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, Ixion's a wonderful energy, They're all wonderful at the top level, and they're all kind of like Pluto, a bit grunty at the lower level, and because they're getting us going. That's, you know, they're grunty when they need to be.
Well, that's one of the things I love about astrology in general, is that you know, we can keep ourselves in the lower notes of what all of these energies and archetypes represent, or we can strive to transcend them. And I think that really is the only game in town at the moment. Really, is transcending our astrology and realizing that we're so much more than what we came in with. That was the starting point, and these planets are showing us where we're moving into, I feel.
That's it. And they're all abilities that we can develop as we embrace them. And so there's nothing fixed in our charts that's making us be in a certain way. It's totally up to us how we use our energy. So, and how we grow as a result. Now, this one here is Quaoar. The Californian Indians, sort of LA area, is where Quaoar comes from. A non-gendered deity, our first non-gendered deity, and so quite beautiful in that way. Quaoar is all about bringing spirit into matter through a practice. That's what Quaoar is all about. So it's a spiritual consciousness. Quaoar is spiritual consciousness. And how do we bring spirit into matter through a practice? Well, there are traditional ones. There's yoga, there's meditation, there's lots of ways that we do it. Actually, anything can be a practice that brings spirit into matter. Anything at all. And so that's what Quaoar, discovery of Quaoar is enabling us to see that we can make anything a practice. Whatever we like, we can turn it into a practice to bring spirit into matter. And that energizes matter. And the spirit gives meaning to matter. And so a wonderful energy. Quaoar sang and danced the world into existence, according to myth. And so a beautiful dynamic spiritual energy.
And very alchemical too. You know, I mean, we can have great ideas and beautiful visions, but unless we take action,
Yes.
kind of Mars energy to manifest from 5D down into 3D, then it just remains a vision. You know, we always have to take action, and even if we're in the flow, it still requires some sort of action to make things happen. And I think that's a very relevant energy at the moment. Is how do we channel the energy down and bring it into something that manifests? So I feel that that's an incredibly important thing to.
So important, so absolutely important. Yes, no, wonderful new energy that we're embracing. So beautiful Quaoar. And then Eris we talked about, but we haven't showed her picture yet. We talked about her being the higher octave of Pluto, who's the higher octave of Mars. Eris and Mars are brother and sister warriors. They were always in battle, aligned together. And Eris was always the last to leave the battlefield. So she leaves no one standing on the battlefield. She is a gentle female power. So Pluto is power, male power, and Eris is a female power. It's a gentle power in its application, but a power that can grow to meet the needs of anything. So she's a huge power. And
Speaks to me of the gentle warrior, the energy of the spiritual warrior, that we need to be strong. And I remember as a Buddhist student being told by one of my lamas that, you know, somebody runs at you and attack you, it's not very smart to let them beat you up and kill you. That's not a very spiritual way of dealing with the situation. And they said, you know, of course, that's why we developed martial arts in the Far East, so that we could always defend ourselves and transform the energy of attack into something else. And I think that's also important, that being a pacifist is not a particularly spiritual approach to things sometimes. It doesn't save you if you're in trouble. So this energy reminds me of that kind of idea, which is like, be tough when you need to, be the last person on the battlefield, but then also be in the softness of everything else that Eris offers us.
That's it. And you know, at the higher level, she brings you know, spiritual truth and wisdom into our lives, and it can be sort of a connection to a spirit guide or to an inner guide. You know, it manifests differently for different people, but yes, she's got a lot of wisdom, and she wants everyone. She's the, you know, it's a diversity consciousness. She's diversity consciousness. She wants everyone to be valued and everyone to be included, and she's part of that big push that's going on in the world for diversity consciousness at the moment. It's you know, and when we don't have that diversity consciousness, there's conflict, and that conflict is good, because it's only in that to and fro of opposing points of view that we grow, if we're holding on to the old ideas and so on. So that's why we're having so much unrest in the Middle East at the moment, and in the old Soviet bloc, because there's just a lot of entrenched stuff there that just needs to change. It's just got to change, and that's Haumea, but it's also Eris. Eris is provoking. Haumea is enthusing. Everyone's getting enthused to attack one another.
Right. I mean, sometimes we need to have some sort of tension point for things to get resolved, and unfortunately, we have many of these in the world at the moment. You know, it's a whole series of podcasts in itself about why those are there. But if we just stick to the astrology right now, it's also part of the transformation. And again, from a higher dimensional perspective, from a non-dual perspective, we can see sometimes we need these friction points. Nobody wants anyone to suffer or get killed. But these, as you said, Alan, so rightly, are deeply entrenched situations that in many cases were created many millennia ago, and they're still dividing people on the planet. And that's not helpful. That's not going to take us to a unity consciousness, right?
It's not conscious at all. And so that's it exactly. It's not, you know, so, and our last one is we have talked about, so we haven't looked at her picture. This is Sedna. So Sedna is an Inuit goddess from the Inuit peoples. And so she is the goddess of the food supply. and she is the goddess of, obviously, fish is the main thing for the Inuit people. Sedna, she's our soul's path of destiny. Our soul, if we think that we incarnate over a series of lifetimes, our soul has an intention through those incarnations. It's not just random. Our soul is growing through those, and our Sedna placement in this life talks about what our soul really wants to do in this life. You know, we're here to do certain destined things. That's our North Node. But our soul is here to do some things, and that's going to take precedence, actually. So the more we can tune into that, the easier it goes for us. Sedna is, you know, she's always trying to get us onto the spiritual path. She can use any, and she's like I say, the furthest out. She's the new outer limit of our solar system. So everything is included. All the other planets, all the other energies are part of Sedna's world, and so everything is included. So she can use any lever at her disposal to get us onto the spiritual path. And so if we're at the unconscious level, she's throwing transcendent crises at us. Crises we can't solve from a Saturnian point of view. We can only let go of and transcend and reach a new spiritual understanding of our lives, where we realize, that I don't need that problem in my life anymore. I'm just going to let that go. I'm not going to solve it. I'm going to let it go. And you know, that is actually a wonderful thing. In myth, it's not easy. It's easy to say that, but, you know, when we get into that situation, we're always trying to solve it. Look, in myth, I'm just going to quickly give the Sedna myth, note a bit of it. You know, she couldn't find a husband. You know, a handsome prince came and asked for her hand. She lived with her father, didn't have a mother. Anyway, went away with the handsome prince. He turned out to be an evil bird king and imprisoned her in the dungeon when he went away. Father heard about it, came to sort of, you know, save her. And Bird King was on a mountain in the middle of an ocean, so they had to row in a boat across the ocean to the lake to get to the other shore, get away. And he came back, and, you know, he obviously found them in the middle of the ocean and beat his wings and created a huge storm, which the boat's sort of rocking up and down. And the father thinks the only thing he can do to save himself is throw Sedna overboard. So he throws Sedna overboard. She doesn't want to die, so she hangs onto the side of the boat. The Bird King beats his wings. Father takes an axe, chops off Sedna's fingers one by one till she can't hold on anymore. She sinks to the bottom of the ocean. All of her fingers become the fish, the seals, the walruses that the Inuits live off, and Sedna becomes the goddess of the food supply. Now, the Inuits, their gods are not dead, and so you know, Sedna was very part of their life. She didn't die when she went to the bottom of the ocean. Losing her fingers was painful, but it didn't kill her. And the sinking to the bottom of the ocean didn't kill her. So when she got down to the bottom, she became the goddess of the food supply. Well, that's a higher consciousness, I suggest. So she grew in consciousness through the experience. The sinking is not. We tend to think that's bad, but that's, you know, it's just our relative view. She actually grew in consciousness. She transcended the experience, and she became a goddess. Now, so. I tell us this because often when Sedna sends us these transcendent crises, we're experiencing repeated pain in some area of our lives. We experience pain. We're in the ocean. We're out of our depths. We don't we don't know what to do. We grab hold of the boat. We grab hold of what we know. We grab hold of the old thing. We go for a solution. We try and solve the problem rather than transcending, rather than just sinking into the ocean, into the sort of a whole new consciousness. We grab hold of the boat because we're scared of new. We don't know where transcendence will take us. We know our existing pain. It's kind of familiar. It's comfortable. You know, and we're here to solve the pain, aren't we? Isn't that what we're here to do? No. At a Sedna level, we're here to grow in consciousness, actually. That's what we're here to do. Solving the pain is not what we're here to do. How we solve the pain is consciously we realize, pain, stop it. And we stop the pain. We stop the pain in some way. We let go of the boat so the axe doesn't come down on our fingers. You know, the pain is the repeated axe on our fingers. We're holding on to something, and what we need to do is let that go, and just transcend that experience and discover who we are at the new consciousness level. At that level, that pain will be a blessing. We'll see it as a blessing, actually. It often takes all of our life to be able to see the pain as a blessing. We're often looking back with Sedna pain to our early youth, at stuff that happened in our lives, which shaped our lives, and at the time was very painful. But when we look back, we see, that's a blessing in disguise, actually, because it took me to where I am now. I'm a Scorpio, I've got Pisces moon, and so emotions are coming up in me as I'm talking about this. Because
I can fully understand, you know, I have Sedna conjunct my South Node, Alan, and as you were telling me all of these things, I'm thinking, that's what that was all about. But you know, I think
that is a very powerful placement. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, tell me about it. So I feel that that's a really powerful place to bring today's talk to a conclusion, Alan. Perhaps we can take the image down and just wrap up with some final thoughts. And, you know, I love what you were just saying there about Sedna. That's really the place that we're at. And I certainly remember some of my first times in shamanic ceremonies with strong jungle medicine, and the medicine asking me to let go, and I wouldn't. I was too scared, and I had to go quite a few times before I learned how to let go. And I think that's so important right now, is that perhaps rather than sinking into the depths, we're expanding into the depths. And Sedna is showing us that by clinging on, we're not really achieving anything much. But if we just let go and fall into the oceans of consciousness, but with awareness, then we can also transcend these hardships and become something truly amazing, like the goddess of the food supply, which is a pretty cool role, I think, to have. Right?
Yeah, totally. That's right. And she had to be looked after. The end of the myth was the Inuits had to go down and look after her, comb her hair, and sort of make sure that she was happy, because otherwise she'd send storms and they couldn't go out and fish and so on. So.
Right. Also, a gentle reminder to pay attention to what the great goddess, Mother Earth, is doing at any given moment, and not to take stupid risks, and to understand, I guess, the nuances of the elemental world. And there are good times to go fishing, and there are maybe not such good times to go fishing.
Exactly. So this is where, yes, all of these new energies are kind of speaking in chorus in a way on this new consciousness that we're talking about, and Sedna kind of embraces all of that with it being the new outer limit. So beautiful. Wow, it's been lovely talking to you.
Losing the light here a little bit. It's evening time here in Mexico, so I want to thank you, Alan. You know, that's been a wonderful, I guess we can say, very quick overview of quite a lot of planets, and hopefully our audience has been able to feel into the energies which you've so beautifully shared with those images. And the words, and also you've given me a lot to think about too. I really resonate with all of these energies, and feel that as we, as a species, as a society, expand into consciousness, all of these archetypes that are now coming through are really, really showing us the need for all of the things that we've talked about today. And I feel that this is the more nuanced aspect of our multidimensional selves, our less dense selves, maybe we can say, that are less perhaps attached to the 3D shenanigans that we get involved in, the emotional traumas that our astral body then has to contend with for most of our life. And perhaps we're coming to that place of transcendence out of those more fixed ways of looking at ourselves. Hence why this show is called Asteroids and Avatars. Perhaps we can start to view ourselves as an avatar having an experience in a collective simulation or something like that.
I love it. Yeah, totally. Yes. This is
So,
how
I
have just the inner planets and the outer planets. Those inner planets are that stuff that we're talking about, the normal life stuff, and then the higher stuff is the outer planets. So totally. Yes, can I just say sort of Dwarf Planet University?
That was what I was just about to ask you. Please tell everybody your website and how to get hold of you.
That's it. And if you go through, search for Dwarf Planet University or type in dwarfplanet.university, you can find the site and put your email address in the newsletter box. That's a good way to sort of, I send out a newsletter every week or two, and that's a good way to sort of tune into these, if you don't want to get the book, or do both. It's all good. Different ways. I think, we're all different beings, and there's different ways to tune into these new energies. So absolutely. That's why I run courses and do the books and put out the newsletters. So, lovely.
I can highly recommend Alan's courses to everybody. And if you have been tuning into any of the planets, particularly today, I think Alan has done courses on all of them. Is that right? All of the ones you've, yes.
Every year I run a course on each of those planets. So then they repeat each year. So
wow. Amazing. And there was one other thing I was going to ask you. Yeah, I was just going to say the newsletter is great. And of course, you have a blog that you post out with regularly, which I get regular emails from that just add more to my astrological picture for the week ahead. So I really, really want to thank you for that too. And again, thank you for taking time out of your weekend, Alan, to, in fact, it is still your weekend, right? It's Sunday.
It's Sunday morning. Yeah.
This is where all the energies are becoming so fluid. So many of our tribe, Alan, have been saying how difficult it is even to remember what happened yesterday. Yes. Somebody had a dream that they thought was weeks ago, and it turns out it was the previous night when they checked their diary. So much that day, I'm like, yeah, it feels like that sometimes, right? That things have become very fluid, and all of these, again, these planets are showing us, particularly, I feel so strongly towards Gongggonng and Saturn in Pisces, they're showing us how to handle the potential for overwhelm, because I feel like it's quite strong for a lot of the collective right now, and grounding and centering ourselves in ourselves is really, really important so that we don't become awash and overwhelmed and possibly float away with all of these watery energies.
Yeah, totally.
So thank you so much, Alan. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And I really do, again, recommend taking up Alan's generous offer to download the Kindle book, or even better, I would suggest to buy it. I love having paper copies of things. But apparently, in the new world of AI, I'm probably going to have to get used to the screens a little bit better.
That's right. Well, the paperback, you get the images, Karen's images in full, whereas the Kindle version, you just get parts of them, actually. So, but it's also good there. So, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Alan. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you all again very soon on another show here on quantumplanet.world. Take it easy. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.